Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Think Unbroken Podcast. If you don't know me, my name is Michael Anthony. I am a trauma mentor. I am a trauma warrior / survivor, and I am doing my absolute best to spread the message. And that message is that you are not alone. You know, trauma is one of those things that can make us feel secluded, one of those things that can keep us stuck in what I call the vortex and keep us from moving forward and reaching our greatest potential. The sad truth about trauma is that a lot of us feel like we are alone in it. And that's easy because relatability in trauma is very hard. Because that first thing, the first way that you reach out and you meet and you talk to people and you understand the effect of trauma is by sharing your story. I shared my story for the first time publicly in 2015. So it was almost 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now. And when I shared that story, I was fucking terrified. And I was so scared because I didn't know how the people around me were going to react. I had already left Indianapolis and moved to Portland. I was way on my way into recovery. I was, going to therapy. I was doing yoga. I was meditating. I was doing all of the things. But I still felt super alone. And part of the reason that I felt alone is because I did leave everything behind. I left an amazing partner. I left an awesome budding photography career. I left a clothing brand that was launching, that was like really taking off. I left all of my friends, my life, my livelihood. And I moved to, which is probably the only city that I didn't actually know anyone in, Portland, Oregon. From New York to Vegas to Miami to Chicago and everywhere in between, Des Moines, Bismarck. I know people literally everywhere except Portland somehow. Don't ask me how, no idea. And when I'm in Portland and I'm going through this process, I realized that it was a lonely, lonely place to be. Sure, I had support through my therapist. I had support through the men's group. I had support through the anonymous communities I was going to. I had support through some of the online groups and blogs that I was a part of. But it still felt like something was missing because the people around me, the people who actually have known me for my whole life, had no idea the truth behind my past. And it was Christmas Eve. I was sitting in this little house that I'd moved to in Portland with a roommate who I don't want to say didn't get along with, but we really had nothing to talk about. And we didn't connect, at least not in the way that I had previously with roommates, where, friendships were creative. And maybe part of that is on me because I wasn't in that emotional place. I didn't want to make friends there or be friendly. I was in Portland on a mission to get as healthy as I could. Not realizing at the time that that doesn't just end one day, right? You have to keep going. But I wasn't really in that place. And so it's Christmas Eve and I just sat down and I lied. It was New Year's Eve. My apologies. And I sat down, I just started writing this mini memoir of the last 30 years of my life. From start to finish, I talked about my mother being a drug addict and alcoholic. I talked about the abuse of my stepfather. I talked about my mother cutting my finger off. If you haven't seen it, here, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm showing my finger right now, or wherever you're watching. If you're listening to this, sorry, you can't see my finger, but my mother cut it off. I talked about growing up in the Mormon church and how strange that was to have to hide the fact that one of the mothers of the ward that we attended molested me. And I had to hide that because we leveraged the church community, and by we, I mean my mother and stepfather, so much to provide us with food and shelter. And at some point, I did some math and my brothers and I must have stayed with 30 plus different families over the course of 3 or 4 years as my mother was in a deep, deep, dark place. I talked about my grandmother adopting me when I was 12, which I am forever grateful and appreciative of. Most people will not get that. And while that was great, it wasn't, because she was vehemently racist. From Southern Tennessee, and hands down the most racist person that I'd ever met. It'd be weird to ride in the car with her and listen to some of the things that she said about the people as we drove by. And I talked about the drug use. By the time I was 12, I talked about the gangs and the guns and the violence and the fights and the breaking into houses and the running from cops. And then I talked about the spiral and the vortex, which you guys know about, my mid-20s. And then something really incredible happened as I sat there reading this back to myself. I started to cry because I was really, really, really scared about the reactions of people once I launched this. Because in the past, when I had thought about trauma, even my own trauma, I had looked at it as, you're a coward, you're a pussy, you're a baby, you're weak, you're whatever. And think of a negative word that you can think of if you talked about your trauma. I was with a woman who's incredible for 7 years. And in half an hour of a podcast, you know more about me than she knew in 7 years. Because I did not talk about those things. So as I sat there, knowing that I had the support of the network of people that I was a part of in Portland, I felt like my environment would be supportive of me in the event that this didn't go well. Because in my head, I was playing out the scenario that, man, people are going to email me and call me a pussy and tell me to like man up and tell me that it wasn't that bad and all of these things. I was creating this story in my head. And by the time I got to the end of it, I actually wrote something really important. I asked for help, just in the sense of like, if you understand this, if you can support me in any way, like support me, help me. And the other thing that happened right before I clicked post, I realized that I needed to be excited about what was about to happen, because the story that I had was burdening me. For years, I sat with that story just on my shoulders. Everywhere I went, everything I did, every person I loved, everything I cared about, there was a shadow right here. And it was my story. And I realized that that story had been owning me. Even though I'd started doing the work years and years in advance, and even though I was doing the things, that story just felt like it was owning me. And again, this comes back to feeling very alone. I felt like if I post this, I'll be even more alone and even more ostracized than I was before. And it just hit me like a brick to the fucking face. It was like, be excited about this. There are people in this world who are going to understand. There are people in this world who are going to support. There are people in this world who are going to relate. And if I can give them the space to relate to me, maybe it will help take some of this burden off of my shoulders. And that's what I did. I posted that thing. It's long. It is so incredibly long, and I cannot believe the number of people that read it. And I posted it, and I turned off my phone. I turned off my computer. I was like, okay, this is going to go one of two ways. This is going to go really well or really bad, and I don't want to find out in the process. I'll check in a day. I'll check in 2 days, whatever that was. And so I come back, and I realize, and I see, I don't want to say I realize, I see that, holy shit, people are talking about this happened or that happened, or they relate this way or that way. And they were sending me messages and text and emails, and people who I have known literally for 15, 20 years at this point are messaging me. People who I literally consider to be close enough to be brothers are messaging me and telling me about their mother who's an alcoholic, their father that beat them, the abuse that they've gone through, the drug or alcohol addictions that they're dealing with, the sexual abuse, the growing up in different church environments, all of these different things. And I'm realizing as this is happening, like, wow, I'm relating to these people in a way that I've never experienced. And this feeling of loneliness started to subside. And in that, another very important thing happened is those people that I connected with, we became close in real positive, strong, affirming ways. And I realized I actually wasn't alone. That was another story that I was telling myself. I thought that no one else could ever understand what it was like to have their stepfather smash their head into a wall, to watch their mother overdose, to steal to survive. And I realized that wasn't true. And all of these people reached out to me, and all of these people shared their stories. And now, almost 4 years later, I am still in contact with so many of those people, and we still have conversations all of the time. And sure, it's a little bit different. I'm on a different time zone, and we're around the world, and everyone's different. But like, the connection that has come from the internet has been so amazing that I have the space to communicate openly with these people. And the best thing that has come from all of this is that it gave me, and it reinforced, I don't want to say it gave me, it reinforced this idea that I had that it's okay to talk about these things. Right? In therapy, it was okay to talk about because that's what you do in therapy. Now, that's a little bit removed from how I went to therapy in my 20s, when I would just show up and give a guy $100 and leave after telling him what I thought he wanted to hear. Right? This is a little bit different. And the stories that we can share and relate to with each other not only bring us closer together, but I think that they also, and more importantly, help take away from the stigma of mental health. And as a biracial man growing up with mental health everywhere around me, between my mother being bipolar and suicidal, my grandmother being bipolar, me probably being bipolar, I don't know, I realized that the stigma associated with mental health is one that we put on ourselves. There are so many people who are here, who support, who talk, who exist, and understanding the same things that we're going through. And I think it's really important that we leverage them. Now, I'm not telling you to go and dump your life story on Facebook. That worked out for me because I was willing to accept whatever the outcome would be. And I was excited of what the outcome could be, which is what it was. And as that comes to pass, like, I'm very happy that is what occurred. But there are anonymous Facebook groups, there are anonymous Reddit groups, there are local communities, there's NA and AA and SA, and there are group therapies and mentorship programs. Even here in Bali, a bazillion miles away from home, I go to a men's mentorship group where it's a bunch of men, not much different from my experience in Portland, where we sit and we talk about things that are real and that matter. It's not about the game or the girl we hooked up with or the shit that doesn't matter. It's real, deep, intimate conversation, and it's incredible. And there are women's groups like that too, and there are groups for the LGBTQ community. There are every community you can imagine for farmers and doctors and guitar players and podcasters. There is a community of people that you can relate to and share your story. And there are people who feel like even with all of that, they're still alone and they don't know what to do. Well, two things. One, if you feel that way, like if you feel totally stuck and alone and like nobody is there for you, I'm here for you. Like, that's dead. I'm fucking dead 100% serious for you. Every single day I get messages from people around the world and I respond to every one of them. And I will respond to every message I ever get for as long as I can. And that's my promise. So if you feel alone and you feel like you cannot find support, I will have a conversation with you. And one of the things that I do as I've moved forward in Think Unbroken and my mentorship is that I mentor people one-on-one around trauma, survival, and healing, around being a warrior and tapping into your true inner strength. And if that's what you need, I can support you in that too. But I'm always open. You can find me on Facebook, it's Michael Unbroken. You can find me on Instagram, Michael Unbroken, Twitter, Michael Unbroken. And the other thing I want to share with you is my Facebook group, which I mentioned in the last podcast. And that is called Think Unbroken. And it's a support group, really in essence about celebrating the victories and the amazing things that we do as trauma warriors, right? It's so incredible that we can do so many incredible things despite trauma and the way that the world had perceived that we were going to end up. It's awesome. I'm telling you right now, this group is brand new, but it is going to be so amazing. It's going to be the best group of all time because it is full of people supporting each other's victories. And we as trauma survivors do not celebrate the amazing things that we do enough. So I invite you to come and join that as well on facebook.com/groups/Think Unbroken. And the last thing that I want to share with you, and probably one of the most important things, is that you're not alone. You're just not. There are amazing people in this world who have your back. It could be your friends, your family, your coworkers. Mental health can make you feel like your back is against the wall and that nobody cares about you. But the truth is you're not. You're not alone. People do care about you. And even if your back is against the wall, you can still take that step forward. And sometimes we need a little bit of support. Sometimes we need a little bit of help from our friends. So I'm going to leave you with this final thing. I support you and I believe in you. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. See ya.